Today's webinar will be about Jupyter Notebooks in CodeGrade and our upcoming support for that, and also a little bit about auto-grading. To quickly introduce myself, my name is Yuri. I'm a co-founder and CEO at CodeGrade. For today, basically, quickly highlight some of the recently shipped features in sort of the past couple of weeks. Then I'll show you the Jupyter Notebook editor and sort of tell you a bit about what our upcoming plans are for further supporting Jupyter Notebooks in CodeGrade. Then we'll just jump into CodeGrade itself and sort of talk about how to auto-grade these notebooks already right now. And finally, I'll share the release schedule for our full Jupyter Notebook support. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to just pop them in the chat, and then we can sort of go through that. Sort of at the end of the webinar, we will have plenty of time for Q&A. I expect it to take about 30 minutes today, so there should be plenty of time left. But again, feel free to put any questions you have in the chat itself. Quickly, sort of what we've been doing at CodeGrade. We've been doing a lot of minor improvements, bug fixes, all those things. If you're a current user of CodeGrade, you'll be glad to know we added some extra permissions, which sort of allows you to use the student view if you're not a teacher, and also the ability to see the test submissions if you're not a teacher. Things that were previously a bit more difficult, we've added some permissions for that to make that a lot easier. We also added new versions for .NET. So if you use .NET, then you can install new versions now easily through a dedicated Autodesk block. And of course, we're working hard on the Jupyter Notebook support, which we'll show today. So the first thing I basically wanna highlight is what's new with Jupyter. And to show that, I'm just going to jump straight into the CodeGrade editor. So previously, if you would open up a notebook in the editor, you would just get the raw JSON file. So if you're unaware, an IPyNB file, a Jupyter Notebook file, is just a JSON file and basically contains like Markdown and code. But now we've just launched the Jupyter Notebook editor support within the CodeGrade editor. So if I'm a student now and I start working on a Jupyter Notebook, I can actually see everything in here. I can click into Markdown cells, I can render them, I can click into code cells, I can do code. I can add new cells below or above things. By default, they're code, but then I can also switch into Markdown. And it's sort of a very similar experience to what you might get in Jupyter Lab. We'll delete them as well. And then if you, what you can see here as well, that all the plots and stuff will be able to run. Let me just quickly do that. So this is currently, we've just launched the editing support. But basically the next step for us in this is that we're going to make it possible to run these individual cells as well. So you'll be able to actually run them and then show it in here. That's not possible yet, but that will come in the summer. And with that, we'll sort of have full Jupyter Notebook support within CodeGrade. If I send this in, and this will actually create my submission, you can see it will actually create it inside the submission overview. Now I cannot edit it anymore, but now I can still give feedback. So I can still, give feedback here using CodeGrade's tools. And this was already support that was available previously. So if you do use Jupyter Notebooks, this sort of makes the workflow a lot easier and more streamlined. And then once the full support for Jupyter is here, then basically it's a very comparable system to what Jupyter Lab does as well. We're just running Jupyter locally. That's sort of a quick showcase of the new Jupyter support. Again, if you just open up any IPyNB file, it will just work. And you can start editing things. So now, of course, students working on Jupyter Notebooks, that's all great, but then we also need to figure out a way how to automatically grade these things. So to talk about that, let me go to sort of a more simple example. So this is a sort of an easier example here where we can just look at it here. So here I have a different Jupyter notebook with 7 questions, and this is sort of a format we often see teachers use. If they use Jupyter in a way, they will have sort of a question statement in here, and then they will have a cell where students will enter that question, and then they have another question, and either that builds on top of the previous question or it's sort of independent. And then students sort of start with something where there's nothing in there yet, and they sort of start working on it. With CodeGrade's auto-grading, I can actually run this within the editor. And with some cool things we can do in the auto-grading, we can actually automatically test all of these questions already. So this is currently available just with the run button. And for instance, if I make a mistake in here, and I rerun it as a student, then I should see it failed. So now, we get some feedback saying we expected it to be 168, but we got 167. So it's wrong, and I get the feedback, and I can rerun it and sort of do all that. With this specific auto-grading example, we're automatically grading individual cells. There's of course also the possibility to grade everything at once. And today I'll sort of walk you through both of those examples. And again, if I make any changes, I can just simply rerun it within the editing interface, and it will start running all of the questions again. Then finally, as a student, once I'm done, I can simply press hand in, and then I will make my submission. My teacher can view it, they can give feedback, all of those things. If you use any of the AI features in CodeGrade, these are of course also available. So if you have switched on any AI assistants, then they are also available. So I can explain numbers, Python. I can also ask that in here. And in this case, this is sort of the full coding assistant. And it will give me some information. And I can use that, of course. Of course, you can switch this on if you wish, but that's also nice. So the assistant also works with the Jupyter notebooks in CodeGrade. And then finally, I can hand it in. And then the auto test will run once more. So all of the auto grading will run once more. And that will then fill in my rubric. And then I get a grade through my rubric. And then if you have CodeGrade integrated with your LMS, then the grade will be automatically sent back to the LMS. So let's take a look at sort of how to set up something like this. So to do that, what I will do is I'm going to create a new assignment. And once I create a new assignment, this will basically open up the CodeGrade assignment settings right here. And now I can start setting it up. An important thing is the first thing you want to sort of decide is how you want students to submit. So I can do this in the submission settings. And within CodeGrade, we have 3 options. Previously, if you were doing Jupyter notebooks, you would be sort of restricted to the file uploader or Git. But now you can actually switch on the editor. So students can work directly in CodeGrade. And what I can actually do now is I can set that. Drag and drop in. We can add a template in here, submit this, and now I have a template file available for students that they can use. So the first time they launch CodeGrade, they will start with the template, they will fill it in, and then they can sort of press run. Of course, we can also allow the file uploader as well if they do want to work on their own environment. And if we want them to use Git, we can also switch that on, and then they can just connect the repository and use Git to hand it. Finally, there's some other things like the schedule and all of those things. I'm just going to make this assignment always available. I'm not going to set a deadline, so students can hand in whenever they want. And I'm going to make the grades available by default. So now the students, as soon as they hand it in, they get a grade immediately and they get all the feedback they want. Now, what I will do next is we'll start setting up the automatic tests for this assignment. And to do that, we'll go to the Auto Test tab. Again, because we're using Jupyter, we don't really have to set a description for this assignment because that's sort of all handled through the template that we put in here. And then we can go to the auto test, and then I'm going to press auto test v2, initialize it, and this will open up the auto grading interface. And one thing you want to do for your Jupyter notebook is you basically want to set up the environment for the students. So you will see in CodeGrade in the auto test tab here, there's two tabs right here. So there's setup and there's tests. Setup is where I can actually set up the environment for the students. This will run just once. And then as soon as students press that run button in the editor, or they press hand in to hand in their file, it will start from the state after the setup. So we basically create an image, and then students don't have to wait for all your installing. So of course, because this is Jupyter, we want to install Python. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to add this install Python block here. I can select my version. 3.12 is fine for me. So I'll just leave it at that. And then finally, I'm going to add a script. Maybe I want to add some pip packages. So install pip. So to do that, I can just do python-m pip install. And then just any package I can put here and just use spaces. So maybe we need like NumPy, then we can just add NumPy in here. If you want some pandas, we just add it right there. One package I'm also going to add is CG feedback helpers, which is sort of an internal package that is available that we'll use in a second. That will make it a bit easier to do some feedback stuff later on. And this is basically my environment. If I want to build this environment, I can already press this build snapshot button. And what it will prompt me to do now is it will say like upload a test submission. So within sort of the auto grading workflow, every time you sort of add some tests, before you actually publish this to students, it will run automatically on your test submission just to make sure your tests work correctly. So I will do that like this. I will add in my solution. And here you will see it will start, doing your installation of NumPy. And this will take a while. I can just get out of here and I can go to my test phase and I can sort of start setting it up. In terms of Jupyter, the first thing we sort of have to decide is the Jupyter notebook file itself, which is available in here. So in this sort of interface, basically, if we go to the test student here, this file is available in here. So we can add any test in here and we can sort of run stuff on it. But of course, this currently is an IPyNB file. And as I said, that's basically just a JSON file. So we have to extract the code out of this file in some way. There's a couple options we have here. The first thing we could do is there's a Jupyter command to actually just convert the entire file to just a Python file, and then it will just concatenate every code cell with each other, and then that file is available, and you can do your auto grading on it. So that's one option, and to do that, we would add in a script, and we would write Jupyter md convert to Python, and then the name of the file of the students. So again, this is executed in the student directory, and this will basically create a calculations.py. For this to work, though, we do have to install the Jupyter package. So we can do that in here. We can press build snapshot, and it will start running this again. We don't have to wait for that. And if we actually want to see what this did, we can just do like ls. Again, this is just bash, so any sort of command will work. And here you can see it's sort of installing all the Jupyter stuff, which might take a second. But while we wait for that, we can already start setting up a bit more of our tests. Another thing to point out within sort of the auto grading interface is that all of the tests by default here are ungraded. So there's no grade, they're just pass-fail, but there's no grade associated with it. Of course, the questions we have here, we want to assign some kind of points to this. So what I will do is I will drag and drop in a connect rubric block. And a rubric will basically allow you to make tests graded by dragging them inside of a connect rubric block. And then we can add a rubric category. For instance, for question 1, we can give 0 points for needs revision, and then maybe 1 point for correct. And now either if all of the tests that are read inside this rubric category, if one of them fails, then they get 0 points. If all of them pass, they get 1 point. And I can submit this. And now everything that's read inside there is now graded. Let's see if yes, that's done. So now you can see it also sort of automatically updates. And again, every time I press this button, it will run on the test submission. So you can see this creates a calculations.py. If I now want to know what's actually in there, I can go a step further and just cat this. And this will just output. So I can sort of see what the auto grading is doing behind the scenes. And now you can see it put all of the text cells, it made that a comment, and then all of the Python stuff, it just added that in here. So this will work. So this is sort of option 1. And to auto-grade this, what we could do now is we can, for instance, use our simple Python test. This will allow us to insert any sort of file, and then we can add sort of assertions around this. So what I will do is here I can do CG insert, which is sort of explained in here. Calculations.py. And now basically all of that Python code is automatically sort of inserted in here. So after this, I can do something like assert Q1 equals, and then we'll do 65.3. And if I run this, build snapshot, what will happen first is you will actually see a new feature of CodeGrid here. Will auto install this Python, this new test that we're using, just so it runs instantly. And then we will wait. And there we go. And now it starts running. And you see it converted. And then the simple PyTest passes because it is correct. One thing, if you're just using plain as search, like the students don't really get much feedback here. So as you may recall, we use that CG feedback helpers package. So I can actually import that. And there is a very helpful module in there called asserter. And I can actually do asserter.equals. And then Q1, and then this. And now I can build snapshot again, and we'll see a bit better feedback. First let's make a mistake, and then get a bit better feedback because it passes. And now you get actually feedback here. So expected value to be 167, instead got 168. If you also want to give feedback that everything passed, you can also add a special thing called init success. And if I do this now, and it runs, now you can see that we get also some feedback, some positive feedback here, which is nice for students to get. This package has a lot of assertions and helper functions, and there's documentation available for this as well. And after this webinar, the blog will publish, we'll have a link to this this documentation too. So here you can see sort of all of the things you can do with it. One disadvantage of this converting everything to a calculations.py is that if at any other point in the code the student makes an error, so let's say in question 5 they have an error, then all the questions will fail if they have like a syntax error or something like that, because then the code will just not run. And it's running all of the questions at once by inserting everything. So a better way to potentially autograde this is by autograding it per cell. And to help with that, what we can do as it's just a JSON file, I actually have a helper Python script that I will just upload. And let's rename this to Jupyter.py. Right. And this is just a simple script that can extract cells. So instead of doing this, what I can do now is do something like this, Python loaded files. So by default, all the files that you upload get put in a directory called uploaded files. And I will run Jupyter.py calculations.ipynb. And then what you will see is what we put in this file here is we put a sort of a tag in here. And we can give this tag to the script, and then it will extract automatically the cell that has a comment that starts with question 1 in this case. So if we this question and then 1. And then we just ls to see what happens. What you will see is now we get a question1.py that automatically gets generated. And now we can change this to be question1.py. And what we will see is this will still work, but now it's just running that cell that has question 1. And again, we can sort of do this for all of the other tests as well. And now it's working, and now every cell is executed individually. So now when you have an assignment like this, where sort of every cell is sort of independent of each other, that's also a better way to autograde it. However, I do want to sort of point you to one other feature we have within CodeGrade, that if you have a Jupyter notebook that's very much like this, where it's just a list of questions where students work on questions individually. So it's not quite like, like if I go to that previous assignment where, all of these questions sort of build on top of each other, then Jupyter is really nice. But if you're using it more for independent questions, then we do also have the coding quiz within CodeGrade. So instead of doing everything in Jupyter, we can actually create individual coding questions in CodeGrade. So what I could do instead is create a quiz in here, and then add a coding question, and then I can simply do something like this, put in my question statement in here, and we call this question 1. And we can actually call this even question1.py. And then we will just be able to duplicate this and then put that in here. And now actually if I, let me go ahead and delete this. Next rubric. And then we can delete this as well. If I now rebuild this and publish this, and then go back to a student, instead of this sort of Jupyter environment, I can also have this more like quiz environment, where every question is sort of on a separate page. So that's sort of a different approach in CodeGrade to do these things as well. And then what you will see here, students actually have it sort of dedicated to check your answer button, which will run the tests, and they sort of are below it. And now I can see, okay, Q1 is not defined. So 65, check my answer, and then run this. And now you can see we get the same feedback. So it's in the end a very similar approach to sort of how you might do what you would traditionally do in Jupyter in a more code grade style. All right, so let's quickly go over the release schedule. So the editing of Jupyter Notebooks is live now. So if you use CodeGrade, you can just use this feature already. We are shipping some improvements to this still, so it's still in beta. And then the running of cells in Jupyter Notebooks, so that you can actually just click on run here and it will open up with the output below here, and you can change things, and all those things will be available in August 2025, before the start of the next academic year. All right.